We like to think relationships are about getting to know other people, who they are, what they do, what they need, why they don't treat us the way we'd like, and how to get them to change. But we can never solve relationship issues by getting better at understanding other people, because your relationships aren't actually about other people. Relationships are how you learn about yourself. They show you all your own stuff. Yes, human beings are social animals, which means we need others, usually humans, but other individuals at least, to survive. But we do not need infinite others. We don't need billions of others. In fact, there's a very specific limit to the number of others that we can relate to at all. And above that limit, we don't get more connected. We don't learn more about ourselves. We get hypnotized, paralyzed, territorial, and weird. That maximum number of other individuals we can meaningfully have a relationship with is called Dunbar's number. And that hypnosis and paralysis we get into when we try to relate with too many others, that is the Dunbar Trap. Nature makes no mistakes, and your symptoms are no exception. Welcome to Mind Over Symptom, where we uncover the deeper pattern. Today I want to talk about conscious evolution as it applies to relating. Or I could say it the other way around, relationships as they apply to self-determination, because they really go together. Relationships are how we know ourselves. Relationships are mirrors, and we can't understand who we are, let alone do something about it, change it, expand it, or grow it. We can't evolve until we have the capacity to relate ourselves and someone else with each other. And this is why others exist. It's true for all living beings, but it's especially true for social or pack animals. And it's especially true for primates. And it is super duper especially true for humans. Human beings are profoundly social animals. We really, really need others. And not just one other human. We need a web of others. We need family, community, allies, friends, rivals. We need irritating people, inspiring people, strange people, familiar people, leaders, followers, peers, teachers, children, elders. We need people because we use people for our own personal development. And I don't mean that in a cold or exploitative way. I mean that relationships are one of the main ways we level ourselves up. Others, people or animals usually, show us where we're still doing our own mind tree. And what I mean by that is our mind tree is our particular set of biological conflicts that we haven't yet solved. And it's also our particular set of special biological programs that maybe we've solved the conflict, but we haven't yet completed the special biological program. Others show us where we're still doing conflict or trying to resolve or trying to complete healing. Others show us where we're still doing frustration, where we're still doing old identities that we're trying to evolve past. They show us where we're still doing personality defense and coping mechanisms. Others, especially humans, because they think the same way, but really any individuals that we relate with, show us what we're currently working on in our individual evolutionary journey within our own psyche or unconscious mind. This is where Dunbar's number becomes useful. In the 1990s, British anthropologist Robin Dunbar discovered a strong correlation between the size of a primate's neocortex and its social group size. So a bigger neocortex, bigger group size. Then he extrapolated that pattern to humans and he arrived at around 150. That's the theoretical maximum number of stable relationships that a human being can sustain. But 150 isn't small. Let me show you what I mean by this. If you're alone, you're not tracking any relationships. You're also not getting any feedback really about yourself, unless you count arguing with a beat-up old soccer ball named Wilson, which I don't recommend as a long-term personal development strategy. If you relate with one other individual, now you're tracking yourself, the other person, and how the two of you relate. And now there's a feedback system, and you can use this to evolve yourself. If you relate with two other individuals, now you're tracking both of them, your relationship with each of them, and you're also tracking their relationship with each other. That's 2 relationships for you, but it's 3 relationships you have to keep track of, which requires brain space. 3 others means 6 relationships. 4 means 10. 5 means 15. By the time you get to 150 people, which is the theoretical maximum, you're not tracking 150 relationships. You are tracking 11,325 relationships. That's a lot of mental tabs you've got open. This large capacity for relating is the reason humans can do extraordinary things. Higher math, physics, philosophy, quantum computing, maybe even tax law. The human neocortex is built to handle a massive number of relationships between individuals, a huge relational web compared to other species. But our capacity is not infinite, and that's the point of Dunbar's number. In 2007, writer Jason Pargin, he was writing under his pen name David Wong, popularized Dunbar's number online on a cracked website with what he called the monkeysphere. The monkeysphere is the circle of individuals your primate brain can actually hold as real individuals, real people, or real beings with consciousnesses. Not statistics, not categories, not enemies, not followers, not as background characters in the movie of your life, but as actual beings, actual people, animals, individuals with their own consciousness, desires, problems, and inner world. Inside your monkey sphere, someone is a person with a soul. Okay? Outside your monkey sphere, they're a label. A voter, a customer, a troll, a homeless person, a rich person, a feminist, a Trump supporter, a boomer, a millennial, a stranger on the internet with a profile picture and opinions they really should have kept in their drafts folder. But they're not actually people. Or instead of being your furry best friend, the individual is chattel or a pest. This real limit on your empathy doesn't mean you're heartless. It means relating has a biological cost. I already mentioned that relating is necessary to our personal development, our personal evolution. But this benefit has a cost. There's not just the cost of the brain space required to track identity and history, obligation, trust, desire, threat, belonging, hierarchy, territory, memory, and meaning between all the individuals in your monkey sphere. And that brain space, although really big in humans, isn't unlimited. But the benefit of relating also has the biological cost in terms of being the kind of person you want to be. If you push yourself to try to relate to more people than your current capacity will allow, then your empathy starts to shut down and you start othering people. You start becoming xenophobic, racist, sexist, and having all the other dick attitudes that you judge others for having. And then you're in the Dunbar Trap. I told you about the monkey sphere because it's the simplest way to understand the Dunbar Trap. When the number of relationships we're trying to have gets too large, we stop relating and we start categorizing. We stop meeting people and we start reacting to abstractions. And that's where human beings get dangerous, because these abstractions are handled by the temporal lobes of the cerebral cortex. And temporal lobe conflicts, that's territorial and belonging conflicts, are where we create psychosis, or in Germanische Heilkunde terminology, schizophrenic constellations. When we're in a schizophrenic constellation, we are not evolving. We are developmentally arrested. The Dunbar Trap begins when we try to relate beyond our actual psychological capacity. Not our theoretical maximum on a perfect day after 8 hours of sleep, 0 family drama, no inbox, no territorial conflicts, no belonging conflicts, and nobody saying, "Can I just pick your brain for a minute?" I mean our capacity right now, whatever that is. Because your monkey sphere is not fixed at 150. That's actually just a theoretical human maximum. Your actual capacity depends on your state. Once you have an active temporal lobe conflict, and especially if you have 2 or more in constellation, your capacity shrinks. Your monkey sphere shrinks dramatically. It's going to be way less than 150. It can shrink so far that even one relationship feels like too much. This is why someone can solve quantum computing problems, but barely manage a relationship with a fish named Gary. It's not about being stupid. It's about being constricted in your capacity to relate. When we try to relate without using the relationship as a mirror, without resolving our own biological conflicts through it, we create more territorial and belonging conflicts. Those conflicts then shrink our capacity further. And then the smaller capacity makes ordinary relating feel threatening, which creates more conflict. That's the loop. That's the trap. So we exceed capacity. We create temporal lobe conflicts. Those conflicts shrink our capacity. The shrunken capacity turns relationships into threats. Then we control, explain, categorize, withdraw, perform, or hide inside a bigger group so we don't have to relate personally at all. And eventually, we call that politics, justice, public health, social order, civilization, or being on the right side of history. It's very fancy what we do, but it's still a temporal lobe conflict or constellation when we're doing this. Othering or feeling like someone's not a real person happens when they fall outside your capacity to relate. Pretty much everyone on the planet is other and is outside your capacity to relate. Everyone's a stranger until you get to know them. When someone falls outside your capacity to relate, you can't hold them as a living consciousness. So you turn them into a type. And when you shrink, when you are trying to think about people from outside your capacity, they become those people, those coyotes, those mosquitoes, those weeds. It can be anything, that crappy weather with the bad climate. Once someone becomes a category, almost anything becomes easier to justify. Mockery, neglect, exclusion, control, punishment, poverty, brutality, war. That's why the Dunbar Trap isn't just a personal development problem. It's the root of massive social problems. When we try to relate to humanity in the abstract, we become less humane in the specific. We care about society while ignoring the person in front of us. We claim to love the people while treating actual people like obstacles, errors, or cattle with paperwork. But the collective is not a person. The collective has no eyes, no soul, no kitchen table, no nervous system, no tears in a parking lot while eating a 10-pack of Timbits. No need for a ride or a warm meal or someone to finally stop explaining and listen. The individual has all of that. And this is where civilization gets dangerous. I am wary of acts committed in the name of society and civilization or on behalf of humanity or the planet. Those kinds of schemes have nothing to do with relating and aren't the thoughts of someone who has empathy for somebody else. They're usually acts made by the most selfish people with such profound temporal lobe conflicts that they're completely arrested sociopaths playing at controlling the human race from elite meetings that they've flown to in private jets. Because society or the masses or the collective or humanity or the planet is what we call people once they're too far outside our monkeysphere for us to relate with them as an individual with a consciousness and a soul. And once we can't relate, we start managing, categorizing, and controlling. And once we start controlling, we can convince ourselves that almost anything is kind, necessary, scientific, progressive, patriotic, compassionate, or civilized. Meanwhile, as far as our brain is concerned, the actual living person has disappeared. And this is why it's so hard to evolve in a crowd. A crowd isn't a relationship. A crowd is too many mirrors at once. One real relationship can show you something specific. Your child shows you your impatience. Your spouse shows you your need to be adored, obeyed, rescued, or left alone for 5 blessed minutes. Your client shows you where you still overfunction. Your mother shows you the exact button you were sure got removed in 1998 after 26 therapy sessions. That's usable feedback for your brain. That's real relating. But a crowd gives you noise. Instead of revealing your mind tree clearly, a crowd activates everything at once. Belonging, territory, status, safety, comparison, shame, outrage, approval, rejection. And suddenly, instead of evolving, you're performing for a stadium full of imaginary judges, most of whom didn't buy tickets and aren't even paying attention. Social media is brilliant at this. It gives us the feeling of relationship without the reality of relationship. Hundreds of faces, opinions, crises, jokes, tragedies, recipes, pet videos, and strangers melting down in comment sections, and your brain is doing its best to relate to each and every one of them. But it can't. And so it categorizes, and we start flattening. We react. We get territorial and lonely, morally superior. We get weirdly invested in people who wouldn't even recognize us in a grocery store. That isn't connection. That's the Dunbar Trap. The smaller your capacity, the bigger the world feels. The nastiest thing about the Dunbar Trap is that when your capacity for relating shrinks, when you start creating temporal lobe conflicts because of your relationship problems, the world feels even bigger and more threatening, which sets you up for even more relationship problems. And it feels like the world changed. But it's just that your psyche can hold less of the world. When you have enough capacity, difference is just difference. Someone can think differently, they can succeed, suffer, set a boundary, or make a mess without becoming your villain, your project, or your problem. But when your capacity is low, difference becomes territorial. So opinions feel invasive, success can feel threatening, suffering feels accusatory, boundaries seem like rejection, and other people's existence starts to feel like pressure. So relating conflicts in our psyche, what in Germanische Heilkunde we know as temporal lobe conflicts, which are masculine territorial conflicts and feminine belonging conflicts, these relating conflicts feed each other. We want connection, but people feel unsafe when we have one of these kinds of conflicts. We want territory, but others feel like intruders if we have something like this going on in our psyche. We want recognition, but being seen feels dangerous. So what we do is we split the world into us and them, safe and unsafe, good and bad, and the monkey sphere gets smaller. And that's how someone can be surrounded by thousands of people and feel extremely alone. They can have a huge audience and no true relationship, or claim to love humanity while barely tolerating the humans in their house. That's the Dunbar Trap in daily life, and in my opinion, a civilizational crisis that is coming to a head. The way out of Dunbar's trap isn't to reject people, become isolated, or move to a cabin and speak only to reptiles, although reptiles do have excellent boundaries. The solution is to mind your own business. Stop treating every stranger, headline, public issue, or internet argument as something you have to personally serve and protect before you're allowed to enjoy your day. Once you've divested yourself of all the relationships outside your monkey sphere, now you can turn your attention to those that are close enough to reveal important insights about yourself. I'm talking about the harder relationships, the real ones. The ones with more riding on them. So I'm talking about your child, your partner, your clients, your friends, your animals, your real community. The irritating person close enough to show you something true. In fact, the more difficult a relationship is, the more charge you have with a specific individual, person, human or animal or otherwise, the more benefit and personal evolution you're going to get by holding your attention on what exactly is going on in that relationship. Ask yourself, what kind of a person am I being in relation to this other individual? And what would you like to be different about that? This is the real work of relating, and it's also where you get the real benefits of relating. It's in your evolution of yourself, because when you evolve yourself, you become better in your own estimation. You like yourself more, and that makes everyone else like you more too. This has been Mind Over Symptom with Lishui Springford, where symptoms are not the enemy and you are your own authority. For more, visit mindtreehealth.co.